2016, Elena Rodriguez, a 38-year-old marketing consultant from San Diego, had traveled to Guadalupe Island, off the wild, rugged coast of Baja California, Mexico, chasing a dream she had held for years, to swim freely with great white sharks in their natural habitat, untethered, unprotected, face-to-face with one of the ocean's most feared predators, believing in her heart that raw courage could somehow overcome the cold, indifferent power of nature. However, she was little more than a novice in the world of diving, with only a handful of dives in calm, shallow waters behind her, and none that came even close to the danger she was now willingly embracing. The sun had risen high over the rolling Pacific that morning, its sharp glare reflecting in broken waves around the dive boat as the crew prepared the group for their descent. The professional guides were stern-faced and clear in their warnings, explaining once again how Guadalupe Island was unlike any other place in the world, a deep-water hunting ground for the largest great whites on the planet, their movements swift, their ambushes silent, their power beyond anything most divers could imagine. While the cages provided safety, protection, and a boundary between human fragility and the ocean's most perfected predator, Elena wanted none. Driven by stubbornness, pride, and a desperate thirst for an encounter so raw it would burn in her memory forever, she had insisted on diving without the cage, brushing off the guide's caution with a nervous laugh, certain that staying calm and respecting the animal would be enough, even as the currents beneath the boat stirred stronger than expected, pulling and shifting with unseen force, a reminder that she was a visitor in a world she could neither control nor fully understand. The group entered the water in cautious pairs, their bright wetsuits and oxygen tanks glinting like tiny sparks in the endless blue. They drifted near the boat where the cages hung like steel shadows, their bars thick and unforgiving. The deeper water beyond stretched into an empty, beckoning darkness, beautiful and terrible all at once. Elena, separate from the others by choice, swam ahead with long, eager strokes, the water enveloping her completely. The only sounds her steady breathing and the faint crackle of distant bubbles as she pushed further, her movements quick and uneven. Small bursts of energy that scattered fish and sent curious glances from other divers, but far below and beyond them, it caught the attention of something else, something far older and infinitely more dangerous. A great white shark, nearly 18 feet long, its bulk graceful and deadly, its body scarred from years of survival, had been circling the edges of the activity, calm, measured, uninterested in the dull clang of cages or the distant scent of chum, until that unmistakable flicker of weakness, frantic movement isolated from the group, vulnerable, pulled it from the shadows, driving it upward. It zeroed in on Elena as she hovered in the open water, still oblivious to the doom racing toward her from the depths below. The first strike happened so fast that many of the divers' onlookers were left frozen in shock, their hearts slamming in their chests as they stared through their masks at the violent blur of motion erupting beneath Elena, a flash of gray and white exploding upward like a torpedo, its enormous jaws opening in an arc so wide it seemed impossible, rows of serrated teeth catching the light for a fraction of a second before slamming shut against her right leg, crushing flesh and bone with astonishing force as Elena's body twisted violently, a cloud of dark blood bursting outward like ink, staining the clear blue in horrifying contrast. Dragged downward in an instant, she thrashed in pure panic, bubbles pouring from her mouth in frantic bursts as she fought against the crushing pull of the animal, now driving her beneath the surface, her arms flailing helplessly, the pain from her shredded limb collapsing into numb terror as the pressure increased. Her body hauled deeper, faster, wrapped in the brutal grip of the predator whose black eyes reflected nothing but ancient hunger and primal dominance. The group above was no longer moving. They could only watch in horror as Elena disappeared beneath the surface, a trail of blood rising steadily in her wake, broken pieces of her fin drifting upward like ghostly debris. At the same time, the shark adjusted its grip, shaking her violently once, twice, the raw power of its movement rippling through the water as though she were no more than a rag doll in its jaws, before releasing her suddenly, letting her body float limply for a moment, drifting downward in a slow, almost peaceful spiral. But the peace was deceptive and short-lived, for the shark returned almost immediately, surging in again, this time clamping down across her torso in a brutal bite that sent another cloud of red spinning outward, the soundless violence of the moment playing out like a nightmare beneath the waves, her body buckling under the crushing force as the predator shook her side to side with horrifying strength, bones snapping beneath the pressure. wetsuit torn and shredded like paper, until finally the shark released her for good, turning away with a final flick of its enormous tail, disappearing into the dark void from which it had come, leaving behind only silence, blood, and stillness. Elena's body floated upward slowly, her limbs loose, her mask cracked, her life already long gone. When the guides finally reached her, gently pulling her broken form back toward the surface, nothing was left to be done but to bring her home and retrieve what the ocean had not claimed completely. At the same time, overhead, the crew scrambled to end the dive. Waves now splashed red. The dream of swimming freely with the great whites shattered forever. In the hours that followed, the shock and grief hung heavy over the boat as the realization of what had happened settled like a weight on every heart aboard. The surviving divers sitting in stunned silence, haunted by the image of Elena's final moments, of her struggle against the raw, unstoppable force of nature. And though rescue teams arrived and recovered what remained of her body, the legacy of her death stretched far beyond that day, sparking an immediate ban on unprotected dives in the waters of Guadalupe, forcing tour companies to confront the dangers they had perhaps allowed themselves to forget, and pushing new, stricter safety measures into place to ensure that never again would a diver face the sea's oldest predator alone, unguarded, and unprepared. The afternoon sun hung lazily over the calm waters of the Bahamas, casting shimmering patterns on the surface where 34-year-old Lena Hoffman moved slowly, enjoying the cool relief from the tropical heat. Originally from Hamburg, Germany, Lena had built her life around the ocean, working as a dive instructor on the islands for several years. She was known for her calm confidence in the water, deep respect for marine life, and belief that sharks, misunderstood and often demonized, posed little threat if approached with care and knowledge. But that afternoon, wading waist-deep near a busy marina on New Providence Island, Lena's ease would turn fatally fragile. The marina, though picturesque, was no stranger to sharks. Fishing boats came and went daily, many casually dumping scraps into the sea, conditioning local predators to associate the shallows with easy food. Lena knew this. She'd warned students about it often enough, but the afternoon was quiet, the water clear, the sky a brilliant blue without a trace of menace. She hadn't brought fins or gear, just slipped into the water for a relaxing swim after a long morning with clients. The decision seemed harmless, the risk seemed distant, but a large bull shark was already circling beneath that glassy surface, moving with slow, deliberate passes just beyond the shifting light. It was an impressive female, nearly 8 feet long, driven into the shallows by the smell of fish remains drifting from the marina. Bull sharks were notorious for their aggression, boldness, and hunting in murky water where other sharks hesitated. They were unpredictable, built like submerged battering rams with thick bodies, blunt snouts, and teeth designed to shear through bone and flesh. In this shark's world, scraps from the docks meant food, and Lena's slow-moving silhouette, upright, bare-legged, splashing gently, triggered a primal response. One moment Lena felt nothing more than the subtle push and pull of the tide against her body, and the next she felt a crushing, sickening pressure clamp down around her lower leg, as if a vise of steel had closed over her flesh and bone. The bull shark struck from below and slightly behind, its jaws locking onto her right calf with ease, its weight and force jerking her sideways with a violent pull that sent a plume of blood swirling instantly into the clear shallows. Pain, unlike anything Lena had ever known, exploded up her leg and into her spine. Still, instinct overtook thought, driving her to twist and fight, her hands thrashing against the water, her body lurching toward the shore with desperate energy. The shark's grip tightened with every movement, its serrated teeth sawing deeper as Lena kicked frantically with her free leg, sending splashes high into the air as screams tore from her throat, raw and panicked. The shark thrashed its head once, trying to drag her further out, the sand beneath her feet giving way as her body was pulled toward deeper water, her world narrowing to the unbearable pressure on her leg and the chaos of water frothing with blood and terror. On the shore, the scene was instant pandemonium. Beachgoers bolted to the water's edge, some frozen in horror, others rushing forward, shouting for help. A nearby fishing boat, moored only yards away, sprang into action. The crew members, hardened by years at sea, grabbed long wooden poles, gaffs, and anything they could reach, leaping aboard their vessel and pushing off from the dock in seconds. They knew the risks of these waters better than anyone, and immediately understood what was happening. Lena's vision blurred with pain, her strength fading, the shark's pull relentless as it began to shake its horrifying head side to side, trying to tear loose a piece of her leg. The shock of it all left her barely conscious of the world above the surface. The shouts, the running feet, the boat now powering toward her. But her hands kept moving, grabbing at anything, clawing toward the sand even as the water churned red around her waist. The boat reached her in seconds that felt like an eternity. Long poles stabbed into the water near the shark's head, prodding, jabbing, striking with brutal force to break its grip. The bull shark resisted at first, holding Lena's leg in its terrible jaws. However, repeated blows to its snout and gills finally forced it to release, its dark body twisting away in a flash of muscle before disappearing into the deeper water beyond. The crew hauled Lena from the bloodied sea with rough urgency, her body trembling uncontrollably, her leg a ruined mess of torn skin, exposed muscle, and deep, ragged wounds that poured blood onto the boat's deck as they raced for shore. Lena drifted in and out of consciousness, her pale face slick with seawater and sweat, her hands shaking from the adrenaline and shock flooding her system. Emergency crews were waiting by the time the boat reached the marina, locals already spreading word of the rare but horrific attack. Medics worked quickly, clamping arteries, applying pressure, and fighting to keep her stable as they rushed her to the nearest hospital. Hours later, after emergency surgery that lasted deep into the night, Lena's leg remained intact. A miracle, the doctors would later say, given the severity of her injuries and the power of the shark that had nearly taken her. Recovery would be long and brutal, a test not only of her body but of her mind, as the flashbacks and terror of those moments haunted her with quiet, unforgiving clarity. In the days that followed, the attack became the talk of the island, not just because it had happened so close to shore, but because it had occurred to Lena, the experienced dive instructor who had always seemed so in control of the sea. The locals, while shaken, were not surprised. They had warned often enough that the waters near the marina were not a place for casual swims, especially when the scent of fish waste clung to the tides. But for Lena, the lesson had been learned in blood, etched into memory by pain, fear, and the haunting realization that some mistakes come with a price no amount of caution can undo. Every scar told a story, and hers whispered a warning she would never forget. 11-year-old Sophie Lane had always been captivated by the mysteries of the ocean. Her room was adorned with posters of marine life, and her shelves overflowed with books about the sea's wonders. Her father, Eric, a seasoned diver with years of experience exploring underwater realms, had promised her that he would take her on her first ocean dive when she was ready. After months of training in local pools and shallow waters, the day had finally arrived. The two stood on the deck of a chartered dive boat off the coast of Monterey, California, the morning sun casting a golden hue over the calm sea. Eric meticulously checked their gear, ensuring every strap was secure and every gauge functioned properly. He was excited and anxious. This was a significant milestone for Sophie, and he wanted everything to be perfect. Sophie, clad in a slightly oversized wetsuit, her mask perched atop her head, couldn't contain her excitement. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation as she listened intently to her father's final instructions. The dive master gave them the go-ahead, and hand in hand they stepped off the boat, descending into the cool embrace of the Pacific. The underwater world unfolded in a mesmerizing display of colors and life. Schools of silvery fish darted around, while vibrant starfish clung to the rocky seabed. Sophie pointed enthusiastically at every new creature she spotted, her joy evident even through the regulator in her mouth. Eric watched her with pride, relishing this shared experience. They communicated through hand signals, with Eric guiding her deeper, vigilant, and protective. Minutes into their descent, an unexpected shift in the water's ambiance occurred as they hovered near a particularly lively coral formation. The vibrant marine life seemed to retreat, and an eerie stillness settled around them. Eric felt a prickle of unease but dismissed it, focusing instead on Sophie, who was engrossed in observing a playful sea lion nearby. And the water beneath him, from the murky depths beyond their visibility, a terrifying shape materialized as quickly as lightning, cutting through a great white shark, its torpedo-like body moving with predatory grace, surged toward them. Before Eric could react, the shark collided with Sophie. In an instant, its jaws clamped onto the girl's side. The force of the impact sent a shockwave through the water, and a cloud of crimson began to spread, obscuring Eric's vision. Panic surged through Eric's veins as he lunged toward his daughter. his mind racing with a cacophony of fear and desperation. He grabbed Sophie, noting the ragged tear in her wetsuit and the alarming amount of blood escaping into the water. The shark, perhaps startled by the resistance or the unfamiliar sensation, released Sophie and disappeared back into the gloom as swiftly as it had appeared. Eric's training kicked in. He secured Sophie in his grasp, her body limp and unresponsive, and began a rapid ascent toward the surface. Every kick was fueled by adrenaline, his muscles burning as he propelled them upward. The ascent seemed interminable, the surface a distant, shimmering barrier between life and death. Blood trailed behind them, a stark reminder of the urgency. Eric's mind was a whirlwind of prayers and pleas, willing his daughter to hold on. Breaking through the surface, Eric gasped for air, his cries muffled by the surrounding waves. The dive boat was already in motion, and the crew had witnessed the commotion and responded with practiced urgency. A lifebuoy was thrown, and Eric maneuvered Sophie toward it, his strength waning but his determination unwavering. Hands reached down, pulling Sophie aboard, followed swiftly by Eric. The deck became a flurry of activity. A crew member trained in emergency medical procedures assessed Sophie's injuries. A deep laceration ran along her side, the bleeding profuse. Gauze and towels were pressed firmly against the wound, the pressure aimed at staunching the flow of blood. Eric knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he stroked her damp hair, whispering words of comfort and encouragement, though terror gripped his heart. The boat sped toward the shore, the coastline a blur. Emergency services had been alerted via radio, and an ambulance awaited their arrival. Paramedics took over, and their movements were efficient and coordinated. Eric was ushered into the ambulance alongside Sophie, his hand never leaving hers. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and flashing lights, his mind oscillating between hope and despair. Hours in the operating room felt like an eternity. Surgeons worked meticulously to repair the damage, and their faces were masked. Eric paced the waiting room, every minute stretching endlessly. Finally, a doctor emerged, exhaustion evident in his posture, but a reassuring smile on his face. Sophie had survived the surgery. The road to recovery would be long and arduous, but she was alive. The incident sent shockwaves through the local community and the broader diving world. Discussions about the risks of diving in areas known for shark activity intensified. Monterey, part of the infamous Red Triangle, was recognized for its significant population of great white sharks drawn by the abundant marine life. While such occurrences were rare, the reality of their possibility became starkly evident. Once an avid diver, Eric could not return to the sport. The memories were too vivid, the what-ifs too haunting. He channeled his energy into supporting Sophie through her recovery, attending physical and psychological therapy sessions, and ensuring she had every resource needed to heal. Despite the trauma, Sophie swore to return to the ocean, but never without a cage. The heat wave of 2024 had gripped the Chesapeake Bay for weeks, pushing temperatures to record highs. By mid-July, the waters had warmed to levels that were nearly unheard of for the area. Normally, the Chesapeake Bay was home to crabs, oysters, and fish, with the occasional shark passing through during migration. But this year was different. The rising water temperatures had driven bull sharks, known for their aggression and ability to survive in both salt and fresh water, farther into the bay than anyone could remember. On July 23, John Latimer, a 55-year-old local fisherman, set out early in the morning from his small dock near the fictional coastal town of Point Barrow, Virginia. Like many others in the area, John had grown up on the bay, spending his days fishing its waters for blue crabs and stripers. Fishing was his livelihood, but it was also his escape. That morning, despite the stifling heat, John was determined to get out on the water before the sun became unbearable. He had heard rumors of increased shark sightings, but didn't think much of them. Bull sharks had been seen before, but they never caused much trouble. As John motored out into the bay, the stillness of the water struck him. The heat wave had driven many people away from the beaches, and the bay seemed emptier than usual. He cast his lines and waited, watching the horizon for any signs of movement. A few crabs and small fish nibbled at his bait, but nothing significant took hold. The hours passed slowly, and the heat became oppressive. John wiped the sweat from his brow, considering heading back in. He was about to pull up his lines when something heavy tugged on one of them. The sudden force nearly pulled the rod from his hands. John quickly tightened his grip, bracing himself against the side of his small boat. Whatever was on the other end of the line was massive, far larger than anything he had hooked before. His mind raced with excitement. Perhaps he had finally hooked a trophy fish. He started to reel it in, but the creature on the other end was fighting back, thrashing beneath the water's surface. Then, out of nowhere, the water around his boat erupted. A large gray shape surfaced, much larger than any fish he had ever seen. John's heart skipped a beat when he realized what it was. A bull shark, easily 8 feet long, was fighting against the line, its powerful body churning the water as it struggled. John had seen sharks before, but never this close, never this aggressive. The shark wasn't trying to escape, it was charging toward the boat. Before John could react, the shark lunged, slamming its body against the side of the boat with such force that the entire vessel rocked violently. He lost his footing and fell backward, hitting the deck hard. The boat tilted dangerously to one side as the shark continued to thrash, its tail slicing through the water with terrifying power. John scrambled to his feet, heart pounding as he tried to regain control of the situation. The bull shark was relentless. It rammed the boat again, its jaws snapping at the side of the vessel, tearing into the wooden planks with shocking ease. John grabbed for a nearby pole, desperate to fend off the shark, but the creature seemed unfazed. With each hit, the boat took on more water. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control, and John knew he needed to act fast if he wanted to survive. In a frantic attempt to save himself, John reached for his knife and cut the line that had hooked the shark. For a brief moment, the shark paused as if confused by the sudden lack of resistance, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it circled the boat, eyeing its prey with cold, calculating focus. John's boat was now damaged and sinking slowly. He knew he had to make it to shore, but the shark wasn't going to let him go easily. The shark struck again, this time hitting the boat so hard that John was thrown into the water. Panic surged through him as he splashed into the bay, his arms flailing as he tried to stay afloat. He could feel the water moving around him, the presence of the shark close by. His heart raced as he swam desperately toward the sinking boat, hoping to pull himself back on board. But the bull shark was faster. John felt something brush against his leg, a cold, rough touch that sent chills down his spine. Then, without warning, the shark struck. Its jaws clamped down on John's leg, the force of the bite sending a shockwave of pain through his body. He screamed, thrashing wildly as the shark dragged him beneath the water. Blood clouded the water around him, and for a moment John thought this was the end. But in a desperate act of survival, he kicked with his free leg, striking the shark's head repeatedly. The shark loosened its grip just enough for John to break free, and he swam with everything he had back to the boat. Grabbing the side of the boat, John hauled himself out of the water, his leg bleeding heavily. The shark circled below, waiting for another chance to strike, but John didn't give it the opportunity. With one last burst of energy, he started the engine and steered the damaged boat toward the shore. The boat limped through the water, slowly leaving the shark behind. As John neared the safety of the docks, the bull shark finally disappeared, sinking back into the depths of the bay. John's attack was the first, but it wouldn't be the last. Over the next several days, more bull sharks were spotted in the Chesapeake Bay, their presence drawing the attention of marine biologists and local authorities. The heat wave had driven the sharks closer to shore, their normal hunting grounds disrupted by the rising water temperatures. The normally peaceful bay had become a feeding ground for these aggressive predators, and the community was on edge. Marine biologists, including Dr. Sarah Delaney from the Chesapeake Marine Institute, began tracking the sharks' movements, hoping to understand what had caused the sudden surge in sightings. The warming waters caused by the prolonged heat wave were altering the sharks' behavior, pushing them into areas where they had rarely been seen before. Dr. Delaney and her team worked closely with local authorities to implement safety measures, closing beaches and advising fishermen to stay out of the water until the sharks moved on. As the summer wore on, the sharks remained a persistent threat, their presence a stark reminder of the delicate balance between humans and the natural world. The heat wave eventually subsided, and the bull sharks began to retreat, returning to deeper waters. The marine research vessel Oceanic Dawn rocked gently in the warm waters off the Bahamas. It was May 3, 2018, and the research team had been at sea for over a week, studying the migration patterns of hammerhead sharks. This part of the Bahamas, near the fictional island of Clearwater Cay, was a well-known hotspot for the elusive creatures. Hammerheads, with their unique wide-set eyes and flat hammer-shaped heads, were fascinating to marine biologists due to their mysterious behavior and wide-ranging migrations. Dr. Lydia Foster, the lead researcher, had dedicated much of her career to understanding these predators and was eager to collect data better to protect them from threats like overfishing and habitat loss. That day had started like any other. The team had prepared their equipment early, setting up their sonar arrays and tagging devices. Dr. Foster worked alongside her assistants, Rachel Moreno and Marcus Hale, as they coordinated the drones that would track the sharks' movements. The day had been productive, with a few hammerheads already tagged and swimming off into the deep blue. Morale was high as the team monitored the live feeds, watching the graceful predators glide through the water below. But as the afternoon wore on, something changed. The team's equipment began to pick up erratic movements from one of the sharks. One hammerhead in particular, much larger than the others they had encountered, had started circling the boat, staying closer than usual. Hammerheads were curious creatures, often inspecting boats and divers with their keen senses. But this one seemed different. Its movements were sharper and more aggressive, as if it were marking the vessel as an intruder in its territory. Dr. Foster adjusted the drone cameras to get a better look at the shark. It was huge, easily over 13 feet long, its wide hammerhead unmistakable on the screen. The shark was moving with an intensity that made the team uneasy. Marcus noted that it had circled the boat at least 6 times in the last half hour, which was unusual for hammerheads, who typically passed by quickly and moved on. Then, without warning, the shark made its first strike. The boat jolted violently as the hammerhead rammed into the side with incredible force. The team was thrown off balance, scrambling to stabilize themselves as the boat rocked in the water. Rachel grabbed onto a railing, her heart racing as she tried to steady her breathing. Marcus rushed to check the equipment, fearing the impact might have damaged their delicate sonar arrays. Dr. Foster watched the water, her mind racing to understand the shark's behavior. The hammerhead returned, this time ramming directly into the drone cage that had been lowered into the water. The impact was hard enough to knock the cage sideways, tangling the cables that connected it to the boat. The shark thrashed violently, its tail slamming against the side of the vessel. It wasn't just curious anymore, it was angry. The research team had encountered aggressive sharks before, but this level of hostility was rare for hammerheads, which were generally more cautious around humans. Dr. Foster knew they had to act quickly. If the shark continued its attack, it could cause serious damage to the boat and the equipment, not to mention putting the team's lives at risk. She instructed Rachel and Marcus to reel in the drone cage, but the cables were stuck, tangled in the shark's relentless movements. The team worked together, struggling against the tension on the lines as the shark rammed the boat again, harder this time. The force was so strong that part of the boat's railing bent inward. Marcus, closest to the edge, nearly lost his footing as the shark slammed into the boat once more. He steadied himself just in time, narrowly avoiding being thrown into the water. His mind raced with the thought of what might happen if he ended up overboard with the aggressive predator circling below. He tightened his grip on the cable, his muscles straining as he helped Rachel pull the cage back up. The shark's attacks intensified. It circled the boat again, this time closer, its wide, flat head grazing the hull as it moved with frightening speed. The team worked frantically to untangle the cables, but the shark wasn't giving them any time. It struck again, hitting the boat with such force that water splashed over the sides, drenching the deck. Dr. Foster could feel the tension rising. The shark wasn't acting like a typical hammerhead. It was defending its territory, and they were right in the middle of it. At that moment, Dr. Foster made a quick decision. She instructed Marcus to activate a sonar pulse designed to disrupt shark sensory systems in emergencies. It was a non-lethal deterrent, but powerful enough to disorient the shark and hopefully drive it away. Marcus hesitated for a second, then hit the switch. The pulse emitted a high-frequency sound that traveled through the water, designed to confuse the shark's electroreception. The hammerhead reacted almost immediately. It thrashed in the water, circling wildly before darting off into the depths. The boat stilled, and for a few moments the team was left standing in silence. hearts pounding in their chests. They watched the water carefully, waiting to see if the shark would return. But the danger seemed to have passed. Slowly, they began to relax, their bodies still tense from the encounter. The damage to the boat was significant, with bent railings and damaged equipment, but the team was unharmed. Dr. Foster, though shaken, was already thinking ahead. The incident had been a reminder of the unpredictable nature of fieldwork in shark-inhabited waters. The sharks they studied were powerful and territorial, and the ocean was their domain. Respecting that balance was crucial not only for their safety, but also for the success of their research. As the sun began to set, the oceanic dawn headed back to Clearwater Cay. The team remained quiet, reflecting on the close call they had just experienced. Dr. Foster knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she also understood that these moments were part of the work. The hammerheads were not the enemy. They were creatures with their own needs and instincts. The remote waters off the coast of the Aleutian Islands, Alaska, had always been known for their isolation and unpredictable dangers. On September 12, 2010, the crew of the Northern Wind, a commercial fishing vessel, set out for another week-long expedition. Captain Finn Harrison, a weathered fisherman in his mid-40s, had been navigating these treacherous waters for years. His crew joined him: Nick Wheeler, a strong and steady deckhand in his 30s, and Joel Perez, a young, eager fisherman with just a few years of experience under his belt. They were miles away from any land, fishing in the frigid, deep waters known to yield valuable catches like halibut and cod. The day had started normally enough. The crew worked in unison, hauling in their nets filled with fish, the deck of the Northern Wind slick with seawater and the smell of fresh catch. The weather had been holding steady, though a cold wind was beginning to pick up, a sign that rougher conditions were likely ahead. Captain Harrison kept his eye on the horizon, watching the skies darken, but he was used to the unpredictability of the Alaskan waters. By midday, the crew had collected a large haul, filling the ship's hold with enough fish to make the trip worthwhile. Joel, standing at the stern, threw another line into the water while Nick secured the latest batch of fish. As the boat rocked with the waves, none of them noticed the shadow moving beneath the surface. That shadow belonged to a dusky shark. Dusky sharks were not common in these waters, but with the warming seas caused by melting polar ice, their migration patterns had started to shift. Typically found in warmer regions, this predator had been drawn north by changes in the environment, bringing it closer to human activity, and now it had picked up on the scent of the fish bleeding into the water from the Northern Wind. Suddenly the boat lurched. A loud thud echoed from the hull, sending Nick stumbling backward. Joel, who was still holding the line, felt an intense tug far stronger than any fish could manage. He barely had time to react before the line snapped, whipping past his face. The crew's attention quickly shifted to the water, where a large fin sliced through the surface. The dusky shark, agitated by the presence of the boat and its catch, charged the vessel again. It struck with immense force, shaking the entire boat. The impact sent a chill through the crew as they realized the shark wasn't just curious, it was attacking. Captain Harrison rushed to the controls, trying to maneuver the boat away, but the shark continued its assault, ramming the hull repeatedly. The blows were strong enough to knock loose some of the equipment secured on deck. Panic set in as the crew scrambled to assess the damage. The shark, persistent and aggressive, circled back, charging once more. This time it targeted the fishing nets still hanging off the side of the boat. Its sharp teeth tore into the nets, ripping through the lines as it tried to reach the fish trapped within. The violent thrashing caused several of the fish to spill back into the water, but it did nothing to deter the shark. Joel, trying to secure the remaining gear, was thrown off balance as the shark's powerful body collided with the side of the boat. He fell hard onto the deck, his hands scraped and bleeding. Nick rushed over to help him up, his heart racing as the shark continued its assault. Captain Harrison, seeing the growing danger, ordered them to cut the remaining lines and retreat. With the shark circling dangerously close, Nick and Joel grabbed their knives and cut the last of the nets free. But the damage had been done. The shark, still hungry and agitated, wasn't letting up. It breached the water, its massive body half emerging as it slammed back down, sending another wave of force through the boat. Captain Harrison knew they couldn't stay here. The boat had already taken too much damage, and the worsening weather was now closing in fast. The crew worked quickly to secure what was left of their gear, but just as they were about to pull away, the shark struck again, this time biting down on one of the steel cables attached to the fishing gear. The force of the bite caused the cable to snap, whipping across the deck and narrowly missing Nick's head. He ducked just in time, his heart pounding in his chest. Captain Harrison managed to get the engines running at full speed, steering the boat away from the shark. The vessel powered through the waves as the predator, finally deterred by the distance and the lack of fish, began to fade into the depths. But the damage was done. The crew, shaken and bruised, gathered on deck, taking stock of what had just happened. As the northern wind made its way back towards safer waters, Captain Harrison couldn't shake the implications of the encounter. The dusky shark wasn't supposed to be here, this far north, this aggressive. It was a sign of the changing climate, the melting polar ice driving predators like this into new territories. The isolation of their work had always been dangerous, but now, with the shifting behavior of marine predators, it felt even more uncertain. The crew had survived the attack, but it served as a harsh reminder of the unpredictable power of nature. The waters they fished were changing, and so were the creatures within them. As the northern wind limped back to port, Captain Harrison knew that future expeditions would carry even greater risks, as the balance between man and the ocean continued to shift in ways no one could predict. On April 10, 2024, a team of marine biologists aboard the Sequest submarine set out on an exciting mission to explore the deep waters off the coast of California. They aimed to study a newly discovered shark species rumored to possess unique intelligence. The team comprised 4 professionals, each passionate about marine life and exploration. Dr. Rachel Hayes, the lead marine biologist, had over a decade of experience studying shark behavior. Known for her innovative methods, she sought to protect marine habitats by understanding these creatures. Dr. James Lee, a marine ecologist, focused on sharks' roles in aquatic ecosystems, while Mia Patel, an oceanographer, specialized in using technology to analyze ocean habitats. Lastly, Tom, an experienced submarine pilot, ensured the crew's safety and navigation of the submarine. The team marveled at the underwater beauty as the submarine descended into the ocean's depths. Brightly colored fish darted past, and corals swayed with the currents. After a few hours, they arrived at the designated research site, where signs of the new shark species had been detected. Excitement filled the team as they prepared to gather samples and collect data. Suddenly, an unexpected mechanical failure struck Sequest. Alarms blared and lights flickered. Tom quickly checked the systems, but it became clear they were stranded deep in the ocean. Panic began to spread as the team realized the gravity of the situation. They were surrounded by unknown and potentially dangerous marine creatures in the depths. The tension increased when they spotted a school of large sharks circling the submarine. These sharks were unlike any they had encountered before. Their movements were coordinated, and they appeared aggressively guarding their territory. Fear gripped the team as they realized they were dealing with a mechanical crisis and facing intelligent, dangerous predators. With limited oxygen and failing technology, the team knew they had to act quickly. Gathering around the control panel, they worked on a plan to escape. While James analyzed the data they had collected, Mia checked the emergency systems, hoping to send a distress signal. Rachel reminded the team to remain calm and work together. Their survival depended on combining their expertise and staying focused. As the crew worked to find solutions, the sharks outside continued to circle, their presence a constant reminder of the dangers lurking in the deep. What began as a mission to study a new species quickly turned into a fight for survival against the harsh realities of the ocean. Once filled with wonder, the underwater world had become a place of fear and urgency. With the sharks growing more aggressive and time running out, the crew had to find a way to escape before their situation worsened. They knew that every second counted as they raced against time. As the team aboard the Sequest submarine gathered their thoughts, they knew they had to act quickly. The sharks outside continued circling, and the constant sound of water against the hull only heightened their anxiety. Tom quickly assessed their remaining options, reminding the crew they still had some emergency tools and equipment. Mia examined the sonar and communication systems, hoping they could send a distress signal. While the main systems were down, she searched for any way to reach the surface for help. Meanwhile, Dr. Rachel Hayes closely observed the sharks through the small viewports. She noticed their aggressive and intelligent behavior, and realized the sharks were not acting randomly. They used the ocean's darkness to their advantage, working together, which both fascinated and terrified her. Mia suggested creating noise and vibrations to distract the sharks, theorizing it could give them a chance to escape. The crew agreed it was worth a try. They gathered materials and prepared a device typically used for research to emit sound waves in the water. As they activated the device, the sound echoed through the depths. The sharks paused, reacting to the noise. For a brief moment, the tension lifted as the sharks swam away from the submarine, drawn to the distraction. The team felt a surge of hope as they realized their plan might work, but they knew the diversion wouldn't last long. Rachel and James quickly took charge, preparing to navigate the submarine back toward the surface while the sharks were distracted. Tom carefully monitored the controls, guiding the vessel upward with precision. The team communicated constantly, staying focused as they ascended through the dark water. The sounds of the ocean surrounded them, and their survival weighed heavily on each of them. However, just as they started to gain momentum, the distraction device began to fail. Mia noticed the sound waves diminishing, and panic surged through the crew as the sharks sensed the change. They began to return, moving more aggressively toward the submarine. Time was running out, and the team realized their window of opportunity was closing fast. Rachel quickly adapted their plan. She suggested using the remaining emergency oxygen to create bubbles, hoping it would obscure the sharks' vision long enough for them to escape. It was a risky maneuver, but the crew had no other choice. Working together, they released bubbles into the water as they continued their ascent. As they neared the surface, the team felt renewed hope. The bubbles created a temporary barrier, confusing the sharks. The ocean surface came closer with every passing moment, and the light of day began to break through the darkness. Finally, they breached the surface, and sunlight flooded the submarine. The crew erupted in relief, knowing they had escaped. Though their ordeal was over, they realized how fragile the balance between humanity and nature could be. Their experience had changed them, giving them a deeper respect for the creatures of the ocean. Rachel, determined to share their findings, knew this mission had uncovered valuable insights into marine life and sharks' intelligence. Their journey had just begun. August 22, 2024, on a remote island off the coast of Maine, lighthouse keeper Sam Thompson proudly performed his nightly duties. In his late 40s, Sam, with his salt and pepper hair and weathered skin, had dedicated his life to ensuring ships safely navigated the rocky waters. Though solitary, he cherished the island's beauty and ocean. Sam's wife, Lily, an artist, drew inspiration from the island's landscapes, while their children, Ben and Mia, enjoyed exploring the tide pools during evening walks with their father. However, Sam grew uneasy during his patrols. He noticed an unusual number of sharks, their erratic movements close to shore hinting at something troubling beneath the waves. While checking the lighthouse one evening, Sam noticed Ben and Mia playing near the water's edge. They splashed and laughed, oblivious to the growing shadows beneath the surface. Sam called out to them, urging them to be careful. He felt a deep dread wash over him as he watched the sharks swim closer. Suddenly, the situation escalated. A loud splash pierced the night as a large shark lunged toward the shore. The children squealed in shock as the water churned violently. Sam's heart pounded as he sprinted to them, adrenaline surging. The shark snapped its jaws as it attacked, but Sam pulled Ben and Mia away just in time. Shaken and trembling, the family hurried back to the safety of the lighthouse, fear etched on their faces. As Sam tried to process what had just happened, the growing aggression of the sharks weighed heavily on his mind. His family was now at risk, and he realized he needed to uncover what was triggering the sharks' behavior. That night, while calming his children, Sam reflected on the island's history and the locals' tales of environmental disturbances, ships dumping waste and overfishing. Could these disruptions be driving the sharks' sudden aggression? Determined to protect his family, Sam decided to investigate further. He would search for answers to the island's dark history. He knew he had to act quickly, not only for the sake of his loved ones, but also to restore balance to the ecosystem. The next day, Sam began his research, speaking with older island residents who had lived there for generations. They shared stories of the changing waters, declining fish populations, and unusual shark behavior. Some believed the disturbances had angered the sea creatures, causing the recent attacks. Sam listened carefully, realizing that restoring harmony to the waters was essential. As he gathered information, Sam prepared for the challenges ahead. The sharks remained a serious threat, but his determination to protect his family and the island's ecosystem strengthened his resolve. He knew that understanding the sharks' behavior was key to a solution. Sam continued his research, talking with fishermen, local historians, and environmentalists familiar with the changes. Each conversation revealed a piece of the puzzle, bringing him closer to uncovering the truth behind the sharks' aggression. Sam learned about the impact of overfishing and pollution on the marine life surrounding the island. Runoff from nearby farms and boat waste had affected the waters. This pollution had diminished fish populations, which in turn may have forced the sharks to hunt closer to the shore searching for food. Sam felt a deep sense of responsibility, realizing that human actions influenced the natural balance. As Sam gathered more information, he knew it was time to take action. He called a meeting with his family, explaining what he had learned and sharing his plan to raise awareness in the community about better environmental practices. He hoped to work with local fishermen and residents to develop a strategy to protect the waters and the wildlife. Meanwhile, shark attacks continued to plague the island, instilling fear in the locals. Tourism sharply declined, and the once lively beaches now stood empty. The fear of shark encounters hung heavily in the air, and Sam realized he had to act quickly, not just for his family, but the entire community. While patrolling the shore one morning, Sam spotted a group of sharks swimming near the beach. They appeared agitated, and leading them was a massive great white, larger than any Sam had seen before. Its commanding presence filled him with awe and fear. Sam watched carefully, trying to analyze its behavior and uncover what was fueling these increasingly dangerous attacks. Determined to gather more data, Sam prepared to dive into the water. Armed with a camera and a safety buoy, he swam cautiously toward the group of sharks, hoping to capture footage that could shed light on their behavior. The water felt colder as he neared them, and the weight of the situation pressed on him. To his surprise, the great white didn't attack. Instead, it circled him, studying him with an almost curious caution. Sam remained calm, filming the shark to document its behavior and collect crucial evidence of the changes affecting the island's marine life. The other sharks began closing in as tension built, their movements growing more aggressive. Sensing the increasing danger, Sam swam back to shore, his heart pounding. While he had captured valuable footage, the risk was too high to stay in the water longer. Back on land, Sam shared the video with his family, who watched in awe as the great white moved with power and grace. They realized how crucial it was to understand this creature and its role in the ecosystem. Sam knew the footage could help raise awareness, and he felt responsible for presenting it to the community, urging them to protect their waters. He organized a town meeting, showing the footage and sharing his findings. Sam passionately explained the importance of respecting the ocean and its creatures, connecting the dots between pollution, overfishing, and shark aggression. The community listened closely, realizing how their actions had affected the marine environment. The meeting sparked discussions about sustainable fishing and the need for cleaner waters. Slowly, the townspeople began to understand the consequences of their behavior, and a sense of collective responsibility emerged. Sam felt hopeful as he watched the community unite, driven by a shared mission to protect the environment and restore balance to their island. In the aftermath of the meeting, residents began to take action. They organized beach cleanups, reduced waste, and started discussing creating a marine-protected area around the island. Sam's efforts had initiated a change in mindset, and the community was beginning to realize the importance of living in harmony with nature. As days turned into weeks, the community's fear of sharks diminished. Working together, they felt empowered to protect their waters and ensure the island's and its wildlife safety. Sam continued to monitor the sharks' behavior, hoping to see signs of a return to normalcy. On September 5, 2024, in a small coastal town in Florida, aging fisherman Hank Lawson lived with bittersweet memories of the sea. Once a vibrant man who shared his love of fishing with his children, Hank cherished every moment spent with his family. Tragedy struck one afternoon when Hank took his wife, Karen, and their 2 children, Jake and Lily, out for a day of fishing. They enjoyed the sun, unaware of the danger lurking beneath the surface. As they anchored near a small island, a group of sharks approached, drawn by the commotion. Suddenly, a great white shark lunged at the boat. Chaos erupted, and the shark's swift attack threw Hank's family into the water. His desperate attempts to save them were in vain, and he watched in horror as his loved ones were lost. The event left Hank devastated, haunted by guilt and sorrow. Once a source of joy, the ocean became a reminder of his loss. Consumed by grief, Hank blamed himself for not protecting his family. His life shifted as he became obsessed with revenge, determined to track down the sharks, especially the great whites that had taken everything from him. Hank poured his energy into hunting sharks for years, honing his skills. His anger fueled his relentless quest, but it also isolated him. He pushed away anyone who tried to reach out, his obsession cutting him off from the world. One day, Hank met Maya, a young marine conservationist passionate about protecting marine life. Maya had heard about Hank's tragic past, and though she understood his pain, she saw the danger in his obsession. She believed humans should coexist with sharks, but Hank saw them as monsters and dismissed her views. Despite their differences, they were forced to collaborate when shark attacks increased in the area. An especially intelligent great white shark was spotted near the coast, and both knew they needed to track it down. Hank sought confrontation while Maya aimed to understand and protect the shark's behavior. As they prepared for the mission, tension ran high. Hank's thirst for revenge clashed with Maya's conservation-driven beliefs, creating an uneasy partnership. Their journey would test their beliefs, survival skills, and resilience as they ventured deeper into shark territory. The open waters were filled with danger. Hank, haunted by memories of his family, was ready to face them, while Maya sought to protect the sharks and teach Hank about their vital role in the ecosystem. Together, they embarked on a journey of peril and uncertainty, confronting natural threats and their fears. As they set sail, Hank felt the weight of his past pressing down on him. The vast ocean held the shadows of lurking sharks, and their mission would force them to confront the complex relationship between humans and predators. Hank gripped the vessel's wheel with the sun shining on the water, his heart racing with anticipation and fear. He was determined to find the great white shark that had haunted him for years. Maya sat beside him, scanning the horizon, hoping to spot signs of the predator. They had prepared thoroughly. Hank brought his fishing gear and harpoons, while Maya had underwater cameras and research tools. Though their goals differed, Hank seeking revenge and Maya seeking understanding, they knew the risks involved. As they ventured further from shore, the water grew deeper and darker. A chill ran down Hank's spine as memories of his family threatened to resurface, but he shook them off, focusing on the mission. Suddenly, a shadow moved beneath the surface, disrupting the calm. Hank's heart raced as he pointed to the spot. Maya quickly grabbed her camera. The shadow grew larger, revealing the unmistakable shape of a great white shark. The shark surfaced, its massive fin cutting through the water. Hank's determination grew, but so did the tension between him and Maya. She wanted to observe the shark while Hank saw it as his enemy. As they edged closer, the shark circled their boat, its eyes locked on them. The moment was both exhilarating and terrifying. Suddenly, the shark lunged at the boat, sending a massive splash into the air. Hank maneuvered the vessel to avoid a direct hit. The ship shook violently and Maya gripped the railing, her heart pounding. Fear surged through Hank. This wasn't just a predator, but a powerful, intelligent creature defending its territory. As the great white circled again, Hank realized the shark was challenging him. His thirst for revenge conflicted with a growing respect for its strength. He realized they were intruding on the shark's domain. Maya sought knowledge and focused on documenting its movements while Hank was torn. His desire for vengeance clashed with a newfound respect for the creature's power. As night fell, the ocean became darker, and Hank felt the weight of his mission. He knew he had to face the great white, but understood that his actions carried deep responsibility. The next morning they regrouped. Hank realized he had to confront the shark without putting either of them in danger. This wasn't just a hunt anymore, but a path to redemption. Hank and Maya plunged into the ocean's depths, confronting the great white shark. It wasn't merely a matter of survival. It was about understanding the delicate balance of life beneath the waves. The experience transformed them both. For Hank, it became a journey of redemption. For Maya, a powerful lesson in coexistence. Although the ocean still held many mysteries, they faced their greatest challenge together and emerged stronger. The morning sun burned hot over the restless waters off the coast of Gansbai, South Africa, a place known for its haunting beauty and apex predators. Beneath the rolling waves, Chloe Roberts, a 33-year-old experienced diver from Cape Town, moved with practiced ease. Diving had been her passion for over a decade. She was calm in the deep, always searching, always observing. Slim, athletic, with sharp green eyes that had seen the ocean's darkest secrets, Chloe was in her element. This dive had started like any other. The currents were steady, the water was cool against her wetsuit, and the visibility stretched clear and sharp in every direction. Around her, schools of fish shimmered like liquid metal, weaving between the jagged spires of rock rising from the ocean floor. She adjusted her buoyancy, drifting lower, mesmerized by the life teeming around her. Her breathing was slow and even. Every detail of the underwater world seemed magnified. But beneath that beauty, the deep always held shadows. Chloe didn't see the shark at first. A 20-foot great white patrolled its kingdom beyond the reef's edge. Massive, ancient, and powerful, the predator moved silently through the water. It was not hunting, not yet. Its black eyes scanned the deep automatically, a creature driven by instinct and raw power. Chloe swam further from her group, following a curious formation of rocks and kelp. Her heartbeat was steady, focused only on the world before her. But as she drifted through a narrow gap between two outcrops, she didn't realize how quickly the world behind her changed. The shark was closing in. It hadn't seen her at first either. But now, as Chloe rounded the rocky bend, she swam straight into its path. 20 feet of muscle and scarred white belly loomed before her like a living wall. For a fraction of a second, both human and predator were caught in mutual shock, neither expecting the other. The shark reacted first. It lunged with a quick move, driven not by hunger but surprise. Its snout struck Chloe square in the chest, a brutal head-on collision that sent her tumbling backward through the water. The world was flipped upside down. The impact knocked the regulator partially from her mouth. The taste of salt water burned her throat. Her vision blurred. The force left her dizzy, her limbs briefly paralyzed by the animal's raw power. As her vision cleared, horror swallowed her. The shark was turning. Its enormous body twisted with impossible grace for something so large. Its mouth opened wide, rows of jagged teeth spreading into a cavern of death. The dark pits of its eyes locked onto her. The jaws came fast, too fast, aiming straight for her head. She kicked with every ounce of strength she had. Her fins lashed out wildly, driving her sideways as the mouth closed. The razor teeth missed her skull by inches but found skin instead. An explosion of pain tore across her face and shoulder as the teeth grazed her, peeling back flesh like wet paper. Blood clouded the water. Adrenaline surged through Chloe's body like fire. She twisted again, forcing herself away from the monster. The shark's momentum carried it past her, but only just. It banked sharply, its tail cutting a violent arc through the blue. Chloe's mind screamed at her to move. The surface felt impossibly far away. Every second felt stretched and distorted. She kicked hard, ignoring the searing pain in her shoulder. Her wetsuit was torn. Blood poured from the long gashes across her face and arm, trailing behind her like a beacon in the water. The shark circled. It had tasted blood now. Its instincts were fully awake. The injury was minor to the large animal, but the scent triggered something primal. Chloe pushed herself harder than she ever had. Her limbs felt heavy. The pressure of the deep clutched at her like hands trying to drag her down. But survival overrode fear. She angled upward, kicking for the thin shimmer of light high above. The shark moved again. It was closing the distance, faster this time, more deliberate. Each movement of its tail sent it rocketing closer to her vulnerable form. Chloe could feel it in her bones, the death that chased her. She refused to look back. Looking back would slow her down. Above, shadows moved. Two other divers, part of her group, and had seen the blood rising like smoke through the water. They were already swimming hard toward her, desperate, terrified. One of them, Nick, a veteran diver who was built like a swimmer, reached her first. He grabbed the strap of her gear and yanked her upward with brutal force. Below them, the shark came on. Nick kicked furiously, dragging Chloe along with him. Another diver, Maria, reached them too, thrusting the butt of a GoPro stick toward the shark. A useless barrier against such a creature, but a desperate gesture nonetheless. The shark closed in. It passed so close beneath Chloe that she could see the scars on its snout, the rough patches of its pale underbelly, the endless rows of teeth ready to clamp shut. But it hesitated, just for a second, confused by the movement, the strange shapes above. That second saved her life. The divers broke the surface in a violent rush. Shouts filled the air. Arms reached for Chloe, dragging her onto the waiting boat. Blood poured from her wounds, mixing with seawater that streamed from her gear and hair. The ache in her shoulder was blinding. Her face throbbed with raw open wounds, but she was alive. The shark sank back into the deep, disappearing as silently as it had arrived. On the deck, Chloe sat shaking, teeth clenched against the pain. Her wetsuit was shredded across one shoulder. Her face bore the raw signature of the great white's near-fatal curiosity, a brutal reminder of the thin line between life and death in the ocean. In the days that followed, as stitches pulled her skin back together and the bruises darkened beneath her eyes, Chloe Roberts changed. She had stared death in the face and survived. But more than that, she understood the creature that had almost killed her. Not a monster, but a predator following instinct. In time, her scars became symbols of survival. She would go on to tell her story not as a tale of terror, but as a lesson, a call for safer diving, respect of the wild, and protection of the creatures that ruled the deep long before humans ever entered it. The afternoon sun burned high above the turquoise waters of the Indian Ocean, its heat harsh and unforgiving, as Leo Koivisto, a 34-year-old Finnish software developer on vacation, clung desperately to a piece of shattered debris from the catamaran that only hours earlier had carried him and 7 other tourists on what was meant to be a peaceful day of sailing near the Seychelles. The boat, sleek and white against the endless sea, had been no match for the squall that struck out of the blue, battering the vessel with towering waves until its hull cracked apart, pitching its passengers violently into open water, leaving them scattered and helpless against the vast, restless ocean, stretching out endlessly around them. Leo had always been drawn to travel to remote places far from the rigid predictability of his quiet life back home in Helsinki. But floating alone beneath the empty sky, the distant cries of his fellow passengers barely reaching him over the rhythmic slap of waves, he felt a different kind of isolation settle in, colder, heavier, more primal. The kind born not from solitude, but from the immediate, suffocating presence of danger. That danger revealed itself moments later, when the faint outline of an oceanic white-tip shark emerged from the deep blue beneath him, its broad pectoral fins stretched wide like wings, its slow, circling movement unnaturally calm. A creature evolved over millions of years to patrol these forgotten stretches of water, merciless and patient. Oceanic whitetips were notorious in these parts. Scavengers, opportunists, predators of shipwreck survivors, and those unlucky enough to be caught adrift far from shore. And even as Leo's heartbeat surged, the others huddled together in a tight group some distance away, their frantic splashes and shouted warnings lost in the space between them. At the same time, Leo's separation had become a silent invitation. The shark circle tightened gradually, each pass drawing nearer, its pale belly flashing faintly beneath the surface, its dark eyes fixed with unsettling focus on Leo's kicking legs and bleeding scrapes from where the catamaran's wreckage had cut him during the chaos. There was no doubt in Leo's mind what was about to happen, but the first explosive strike still came faster than thought, the shark's jaws opening wide, its teeth like jagged rows of white glass locking around Leo's left thigh in a brutal, twisting grip. The force of the bite tore him from the surface in an instant, yanking him downward in a violent rush of bubbles and blood. The pressure in his ears building sharply as the water closed overhead, the world narrowing to a haze of red, and the crushing agony radiating from his leg where flesh and muscle tore under the shark's relentless pull. Leo thrashed with every ounce of strength he could summon, his free leg kicking wildly, hands clawing at the rough skin of the shark's head, the sensation of its sandpaper hide burning across his palms as he fought not only for freedom but for the primal need to breathe. Above him, the surface shimmered like a distant, unreachable sky. Still, some desperate surge of adrenaline drove him to fight harder, lashing out with his fists, jabbing at the sensitive area near the predator's gills and eyes, every blow fueled by the raw terror flooding his veins, until the shark released him with sudden, chilling ease, its body twisting away into the bloody murk it had created. Leo kicked upward frantically, lungs screaming, his vision narrowing as the sunlight fractured above him, pulling himself toward life with nothing left but instinct. Breaking the surface felt like shattering glass, his first ragged gasp of air a mixture of salt water and blood. The pain in his leg unbearable, his body weak and trembling as he realized he was drifting further from the safety of the group. Their horrified faces turned toward him, arms waving frantically toward a distant boat approaching fast. Drawn by the growing commotion and the unmistakable slick of blood spreading across the surface in cruel, widening streaks. The shark had not gone far. Its dark shadow reappeared beneath him, its movements more direct now, driven not just by curiosity but by the taste of blood and the thrill of the hunt. Leo's battered body barely responded as he splashed weakly, trying to appear larger, trying to fight the growing weight of exhaustion that dragged at his limbs. At the same time, the boat's engine roared closer, slicing across the water toward him with desperate speed. The crew acted without hesitation. A rescue line sliced through the air, landing dangerously close, and Leo forced his shaking arms to seize it. His numbed fingers barely managed to grip the coarse rope as strong hands hauled him toward salvation. The shark made one final pass beneath him, its looming form a haunting silhouette against the fractured light. But the aggravating noise, the thrash of propellers, and the flurry of movement drove it back into the depths, vanishing as quickly as it had come. Leo's body, slick with blood and seawater, was dragged aboard, his injured leg a grotesque mess of shredded flesh and torn muscle. The crew working feverishly to stem the bleeding, their hands pressing into the wounds. At the same time, voices shouted instructions and calls for medical assistance crackled over radios. Every breath burned, every second stretched impossibly long, but Leo was alive, his heart hammering against his ribs as the realization of what had happened settled heavily over him. Later, long after the chaos had passed, after he had been stabilized and his wounds stitched and dressed in the sterile calm of a hospital, Leo would stare out over the vast, endless sea, feeling the phantom ache of teeth in his flesh, haunted not only by the memory of the shark's eyes or the searing pain of its bite, but by the brutal knowledge of how fragile life could become in the space of a single heartbeat. And though he had survived, he knew its shadow would never leave him. Anastasia Vetrov had always loved the ocean. At 26 years old, she carried herself with calm confidence from years of swimming in lakes, rivers, and seas back home in Russia. The honeymoon in Mauritius had been a dream come true. A quiet escape with her husband, Roman, after the whirlwind of their wedding. The warm sun, the calm turquoise waters, and the picture-perfect cove seemed worlds away from the cold streets of Moscow. That afternoon in 2013, the beach near their resort felt almost deserted. A secluded paradise where the hours drifted by slowly beneath a cloudless sky. Roman stayed on shore, stretched out on a towel with his camera, occasionally raising it to snap pictures of his wife as she moved further from the shore, her snorkel breaking the sea's glassy surface. Anastasia was relaxed, floating effortlessly, watching the sunlight ripple over the sandy seabed and the occasional flash of a fish darting beneath her. She had ventured farther than most tourists dared, away from the laughter and chatter of the shallow shallows, beyond the buoys that bobbed gently with the current. The water grew deeper beneath her, the color darkening almost imperceptibly as the cove sloped downward, a gradient of blue that felt peaceful rather than ominous. Unbeknownst to her, the area had been subject to quiet complaints from locals for months, whispers about fishermen and boats cleaning their catches near the rocky edges, leaving behind trails of blood and scraps that vanished quickly into the currents. Few visitors noticed these warnings, and Anastasia certainly hadn't heard them. The tiger shark patrolling the area was a large female, drawn closer to the shore by the alluring scent of discarded fish parts swirling in the water hours earlier. Opportunistic by nature and aggressive in its hunting style, the shark had been gliding through the deep, lazy yet alert, its senses finely tuned to any disturbance. When Anastasia kicked again, shifting her weight to adjust her snorkel, the vibrations rippled outward, subtle, but enough to catch the shark's attention. It moved closer, the distance between predator and prey closing beneath the quiet surface. Anastasia floated, oblivious, until a shadow shifted beneath her. In the clear water there was no sound, No splash, just a shape materializing from below, monstrous and fast. The first strike was brutal. The shark rose upward and latched onto her torso and upper thigh in a devastating bite, its powerful teeth crushing down through skin, muscle, and bone with horrifying force. Anastasia's body arched violently, instinctively twisting in agony as the sharp pain tore through her. The shock froze her muscles before terror and survival instincts exploded through her system. Blood burst into the water in a thick, expanding cloud of red, drifting in ragged plumes that curled upward like smoke. The salt stung her open wounds as she tried to scream, the sound garbled through the snorkel, barely carrying over the growing splashes of her struggle. On shore, Roman saw only haphazard movement, violent thrashing far beyond what he expected from casual swimming. The shape of his wife was still visible, but smaller now, distant and frantic. Then he saw the crimson haze spreading across the perfect blue, unnatural and sickening. His heart seized in his chest with paralyzing dread. The shark twisted its body in a savage, practiced motion, dragging Anastasia downward. Her leg, gripped firmly in the animal's serrated jaws, felt like it was being crushed in a vise of bone-snapping pressure. She clawed at the water, adrenaline surging, desperate to escape, but the predator's strength was overwhelming. Her snorkel was ripped away as her head submerged again and again, water flooding into her mouth and nose between silent, panicked gasps. Beachgoers began shouting from the sand, their voices a rising chorus of alarm as they recognized what was happening. The stillness of the idyllic afternoon shattered in seconds. Reacting to the unfolding horror, lifeguards sprinted toward a nearby rescue boat, their radios crackling as they called for emergency backup. Anastasia's body was weakening as the shark shook her again, stripping away her energy and life force. Every kick she managed felt slower, her strength slipping away as shock set in. Still, she fought, twisting her free leg, striking at the unyielding bulk beside her, her arms straining for the surface, air, and life. The salt water turned metallic in her mouth as more blood spread around her, darkening the sea until it was impossible to tell where she ended, and it began. The lifeguards reached her in what felt like an eternity but had been barely minutes. They swung poles from the side of the rescue boat, battering the shark in desperate, clumsy strikes, the blows landing hard against its rough sandpaper skin. The predator, agitated now by the noise and resistance, finally released its grip, vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared, its agile body slicing back into the deep. Lena's body floated limply in the water, her skin ghostly pale beneath the blood that pooled around her. Strong hands hauled her aboard, their movements practiced but frantic, faces drawn tight with urgency as they pressed towels and fabric against her wounds, trying to stop the relentless bleeding that pulsed from her torn leg and ravaged torso. Roman was barely aware of the boat's return to shore. His world narrowed to the broken shape of his wife lying before him, her breath shallow, her eyes fluttering weakly, her life draining despite their efforts. An ambulance waited on the sand, paramedics moving with cold precision as they transferred her to a stretcher, the siren beginning its mournful wail as they sped toward the hospital. But the damage had been too extensive. Anastasia's injuries, deep and catastrophic, had ravaged arteries, organs, and tissue beyond repair. She died en route, her heart finally giving way long before the hospital could save her. The aftermath sent shockwaves through the quiet resort town. News of the attack spread rapidly, sparking outrage and fear. Local authorities launched immediate investigations, and safety protocols that had long been neglected were scrutinized and overhauled. Signs were posted. Feeding near swimming areas was banned outright. Tour operators were forced to change practices. For Roman, the loss was unbearable. He had come to Mauritius to begin a life with the woman he loved, only to leave with memories stained forever by terror and grief. September 16, 2024, the U.S. Navy vessel USS Archon was gliding through the cold waters of the North Atlantic. The ship was conducting routine patrols about 300 miles off the coast of Nova Scotia, Canada, an area known for its unpredictable weather and its dense population of great white sharks. The vessel's crew, led by Commander Ethan Graves, had grown accustomed to the rhythm of these patrols. Long hours of monitoring the radar, scanning for submarines, and maintaining the vessel, and the day had started like any other, with the crew quietly going about their duties, unaware of the terror lurking beneath the waves. At around noon, the waters had grown eerily calm, a marked change from the usual choppy conditions in this region. The temperature had dropped noticeably as well, something that had caught the crew's attention. Yet nothing seemed particularly out of the ordinary. Commander Graves, a seasoned officer in his early 50s with decades of naval experience, stood at the bridge, reviewing reports and occasionally glancing out at the gray waters. The ocean stretched endlessly in all directions, and there was no sign of activity on the surface. Beneath those waters, however, something large and powerful was approaching. The North Atlantic was a known hunting ground for great white sharks, especially in the late summer and early fall when seals migrated through the region. These sharks could grow to incredible sizes, often reaching over 20 feet in length. They were apex predators, feared for their power and unpredictability. But none of the crew aboard the Archon could have anticipated what was about to happen. Just after lunch, as the crew carried on with their routines, a sudden jolt shook the ship. At first, everyone assumed it was a mechanical issue, a malfunction in the engine, or perhaps the ship striking a submerged object. But the tremor felt too forceful, too unnatural. Alarms began to blare as the vessel tilted slightly, sending men scrambling to check for damages. That's when the lookout, stationed at the front of the vessel, spotted something in the water. A dorsal fin, a massive, unmistakable dorsal fin, was slicing through the surface of the water, heading directly for the ship. Before anyone could react, the creature launched itself out of the water in a powerful breach, slamming its full weight against the hull with a thunderous impact. It was a great white shark, but unlike any the crew had ever seen before. This one was enormous, at least 25 feet long, its body covered in scars from years of battles in the wild. The shark's sheer size and force knocked several crew members off balance as the ship swayed from the impact. Commander Graves rushed to the bridge, barking orders for damage control, but it quickly became clear that the situation was dire. The shark struck again, this time ramming its snout into the ship's stern, denting the steel plating and causing the ship to take on water. The vessel, though built for combat and durability, was no match for the relentless power of the creature attacking it. The crew scrambled to initiate emergency repairs, working quickly to patch the damage as water began flooding into the lower decks. The great white circled the ship, its dark shadow visible beneath the surface. It moved with terrifying purpose, as though it was hunting the vessel itself. Sharks were known to breach boats, but never with this level of aggression. The crew was on edge, watching the water with growing dread. The shark breached again, this time closer to the bow, its jaws snapping at the air as it came crashing down against the hull. Metal groaned and screeched as the shark's massive body collided with the ship again and again. Inside the ship, panic was beginning to set in. The damage to the hull was extensive, and the repairs were not holding as well as they had hoped. Several compartments had already been sealed off to prevent further flooding, but the situation was growing more dangerous by the minute. Commander Graves ordered the crew to abandon non-essential areas of the ship and focus all efforts on keeping the vessel afloat. They worked with frantic energy, the constant fear of another attack driving them forward. As the shark circled back for yet another strike, the crew in the engine room heard a deep, resonant thud. The force of the shark's impact had caused one of the main generators to short out, cutting power to parts of the ship. Lights flickered, and the vessel slowed to a crawl as engineers struggled to get the systems back online. Above deck, the crew was now fully aware of the scale of the threat. The great white shark was acting with a level of aggression and persistence they had never encountered before. Commander Graves kept his eyes fixed on the water, his mind racing with possibilities. Sharks were opportunistic feeders, driven by instinct and hunger. But this attack felt different. It was more deliberate, almost like the shark was reacting to some unseen force. He thought back to recent briefings about the changing conditions in the ocean. Rising temperatures, depleting fish stocks, and shifts in migration patterns were causing disruptions in marine ecosystems all over the world. Could these environmental changes be affecting shark behavior? Was this great white lashing out because its natural food sources were dwindling? The shark attacked again, breaching high out of the water and slamming down onto the deck of the ship. The impact was so severe that it crushed part of the railing and sent debris flying. Several crew members were knocked to the ground by the force of the blow, and the shark's enormous body thrashed violently before sliding back into the water. The boat rocked dangerously, its balance compromised by the repeated strikes. As the crew worked to stabilize the vessel, they noticed something even more unsettling. Sharks were gathering around the ship. Smaller sharks, perhaps drawn by the noise and disturbance, were circling the area, their dorsal fins breaking the surface. The great white continued its assault, undeterred by the ship's defenses. Every few minutes it would breach again, striking the vessel with terrifying precision as if it were determined to sink it. The crew fought to keep the ship afloat, patching the damage as quickly as possible. But the shark showed no signs of relenting. The water around the ship was churning with activity as the predators closed in. Commander Graves knew they had little time left. The crew needed to find a way to deter the shark before the ship was irreparably damaged. They activated sonar pulses designed to repel large marine life, hoping it would be enough to drive the great white away. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the shark began to retreat. The sonar pulses seemed to disrupt its behavior, causing it to swim off into the deep, followed by the smaller sharks. The water grew still again, but the damage had been done. The USS Archon was severely compromised. Its hull was battered, and the relentless attack shook the crew. As the ship limped back toward the coast for repairs, Commander Graves couldn't shake the thought that something was changing in the ocean. The attack wasn't just a random encounter. It was a sign of a larger shift. Environmental changes were driving these predators to new extremes, and the balance between humans and the ocean's apex predators was becoming dangerously fragile. Morning of August 5, 2021, the commercial fishing fleet based out of Chatham, Massachusetts, set out for a routine day of work off the coast of Cape Cod. The fleet, led by Captain Ron Walsh of the Silver Marlin, had been fishing these waters for decades. Cape Cod was famous for its abundant marine life, and the summer season was always prime for fishing. The boats targeted tuna, haddock, and swordfish, using heavy baited lines that often brought in impressive catches. But this year, things had felt different. There had been rumors of increased shark activity in the area, particularly sightings of mako sharks, fast, powerful predators known for their speed and aggressive nature. The fishermen were cautious, but no one was prepared for what was about to unfold. Ron Walsh had seen his fair share of sharks over the years. At 48, he was experienced and level-headed, running a tight operation with his crew. That morning, the weather was fair and the sea was calm as the fleet reached their fishing grounds about 20 miles offshore. Ron and his crew set about their tasks, dropping lines and setting bait. The radio crackled with chatter from the other boats in the fleet, all reporting good conditions and a steady start to the day. By noon, the catch was coming in strong. The crew of the Silver Marlin worked efficiently, pulling in line after line of tuna, their coolers quickly filling. But as they hauled in their nets, something began to feel off. The water around the boat started to churn with unusual intensity, and small fish scattered frantically, fleeing from an unseen threat. Ron noticed the change and immediately thought of the sharks. The first mako appeared just as the crew was pulling in a particularly large tuna. The sleek, torpedo-shaped body of the shark darted toward the boat at incredible speed, drawn by the scent of the bait and the thrashing fish. Ron yelled for his crew to pull the lines in faster, but the shark was already too close. With a sudden burst of speed, the mako lunged at the tuna, its jaws snapping shut around the fish just as it was being lifted out of the water. The crew watched in shock as the shark tore the tuna in half, sending a spray of blood and water across the deck. Panic rippled through the fleet as more mako sharks appeared, drawn by the commotion. The sleek predators began circling the boats, their eyes locked on the fishermen and their catch. The crew scrambled to pull in the remaining lines, but the sharks were relentless. One of the makos charged the side of the Silver Marlin, its powerful body slamming into the hull with a force that rattled the entire boat. Several crew members lost their balance, stumbling as the shark circled back for another hit. Meanwhile, across the fleet, other boats were facing the same crisis. The makos were targeting the baited lines, and the fish caught on them, leaping out of the water to snatch their prey directly from the hooks. The fishermen tried to fend them off with poles and gaffs, but the sharks were too fast, darting in and out of range with terrifying precision. One of the smaller boats in the fleet, the Blue Runner, was struck by a particularly large mako, which tore through the side of the vessel, damaging its engine and leaving the boat dead in the water. On the Silver Marlin, things were getting worse. Another shark had latched onto one of the lines, pulling with such force that it threatened to drag a crew member overboard. Ron and another crewman rushed to help, cutting the line before the shark could do any more damage. But the sharks were becoming more aggressive, their feeding frenzy spiraling out of control. One of the crew, a young deckhand named Eric, was struck by a shark's thrashing tail, sending him sprawling across the deck. He lay there, dazed and bleeding from a gash on his head as the sharks continued their assault. Ron knew they couldn't keep this up. The sharks were relentless, and the fleet was suffering severe damage. He called out on the radio, urging the other boats to start pulling in their lines and retreat to safer waters. But the Makos were everywhere now, and the crew's attempts to drive them away were failing. Several boats reported damage to their hulls and equipment, with crew members injured from the sharks' violent attacks. As the fleet tried to regroup, marine biologists from a nearby research vessel, led by Dr. Nora Caldwell, arrived to assess the situation. They had been tracking the movements of the Mako sharks in the area for weeks, studying their behavior and migration patterns. Dr. Caldwell was alarmed by the reports coming in from the fishing fleet. She knew Makos could be aggressive when provoked, but the level of aggression the fishermen were describing was unprecedented. After contacting Ron and the other captains, Dr. Caldwell suggested a strategy to help mitigate the attacks. The Makos were being drawn in by the scent of the fish and the vibrations caused by the boat's engines and equipment. To deter them, she advised the fleet to deploy acoustic devices that emitted a high-pitched sound known to repel sharks. It wasn't a guaranteed solution, but it was the only non-lethal option available to help the fishermen protect their boats and themselves. The fleet quickly set to work deploying the devices, attaching them to the sides of their boats and along their lines. The effect was almost immediate. The sharks, disoriented by the sound, began to retreat, their frenzied movements slowing as they moved away from the boats. Within an hour, the attacks had ceased, and the Makos had dispersed into deeper waters. The day had been disastrous for the fleet. Several boats had sustained heavy damage, and the fishing operations had been severely disrupted. Ron and the other captains knew they were facing a difficult season ahead. The Makos were still out there, and there was no telling when they might return. The cost of the damaged equipment and lost catch weighed heavily on their minds. Still, they also understood that the sharks were not the enemy. They were part of the ecosystem that had been pushed to the brink by overfishing and environmental changes. On July 18, 2015, the Florida Keys were buzzing with excitement. It was the day of the annual high-speed jet ski race off the coast of Marathon, a small town known for its stunning waters and vibrant marine life. Spectators had lined the shore, cheering as racers from across the country prepared to compete in one of the most thrilling water events in the region. Among them was Jake Carter, a seasoned racer who had been training for months. The weather was perfect, and the waters looked calm, ideal conditions for the competition. By mid-morning, the race had started. Jet skis roared across the water, sending up waves as racers weaved through the course's buoys. The participants were focused, adrenaline pumping as they pushed their machines to the limit, reaching speeds of up to 60 miles per hour. The atmosphere was electric, with the sound of engines mixing with the excited cheers from the crowd. Jake was in the zone, staying neck and neck with the race leader, eyes on the finish line. But beneath the surface, something was amiss. The waters off the Florida Keys were known to be home to a variety of sharks, including blacktip sharks, which were common in these waters. Typically, blacktips were not aggressive toward humans unless provoked. However, the commotion from the race, churning water, the loud motors, and the constant vibrations, was drawing the sharks closer to the action. As the racers rounded one of the final buoys, disaster struck. A large blacktip shark, agitated by the activity, became entangled in one of the floating buoys used to mark the course. Thrashing violently in an attempt to free itself, the shark collided with the jet skis speeding by. The first racer to encounter the shark was thrown off his machine as the shark's powerful tail struck him across the chest. The impact sent him sprawling into the water, dazed and bleeding from a gash on his shoulder. Jake, unaware of the chaos unfolding ahead, sped toward the same area. He saw the splash and the racers struggling to stay afloat, but didn't realize the danger beneath the water until it was too late. The black-tipped shark, still frantic, lunged upward, its teeth grazing Jake's leg as it surged past him. The sharp pain shot through Jake's body as he lost control of his jet ski, tumbling into the water just feet away from the injured shark. Panic erupted among the other racers as they saw the shark thrashing and the injured men in the water. Spectators on the shore screamed in alarm. Their cheers turned to cries of fear as the realization of the shark's presence spread. The race organizers, stationed in boats along the course, quickly called for an emergency halt to the event, signaling the racers to retreat to safety. But the shark, still caught in the buoy line, continued its aggressive behavior. Two more racers, trying to steer clear of the chaos, were knocked off their jet skis as the shark thrashed wildly. One of them, a woman named Kelly Harper, felt the shark's body brush against her as she struggled to stay above water, her life vest the only thing keeping her afloat. Her leg was bruised and bloodied from the impact, but she managed to swim toward one of the rescue boats that had sped toward the scene. The rescue crews moved swiftly, pulling the injured racers from the water as the black-tipped shark finally broke free from the buoy. The shark, disoriented and stressed, swam away from the scene, leaving behind a trail of blood and confusion. On shore, paramedics rushed to treat the injured participants. The shark's teeth had deeply cut Jake's leg, and another racer had suffered a concussion from the force of being thrown off his jet ski. The race was officially called off, and the atmosphere shifted from excitement to tension as everyone processed what had just happened. Local marine authorities, along with experts from a nearby marine biology institute, were called in to investigate the incident. Black-tip sharks, while normally not a serious threat to humans, had been known to become aggressive when stressed or agitated. The commotion of the high-speed race had likely disturbed the shark's natural behavior, causing it to act out aggressively. As the day wore on, event organizers met with the marine experts to discuss the incident and the measures that needed to be taken to prevent future occurrences. There had been a growing concern in the community about the increasing interaction between marine life and human activities, especially in areas like the Florida Keys, where tourism and water sports were common. The event exposed the delicate balance between adrenaline-fueled sports and the need to protect the marine environment. The race's cancellation was a blow to the participants and the organizers, but safety was the priority. The injuries, though painful, were not life-threatening, and all the racers were expected to recover. Jake, lying on a stretcher with his leg bandaged, reflected on the experience with a mix of fear and relief. He had been in dangerous situations before, but nothing compared to the raw power of the shark that had come so close to ending his race, and possibly his life. In the weeks that followed, local authorities worked with marine experts to develop new safety protocols for future water events. They implemented stricter guidelines for race courses in shark-populated waters, including monitoring systems that could detect large marine animals in the area before events began. The incident sparked a broader conversation about the intersection of human recreation and wildlife conservation, with many calling for more awareness of the impact that high-energy activities could have on marine life, emphasizing the need for preventive measures in popular water activities. On March 25, 2024, the seasoned crew aboard the fishing vessel Horizon's Edge embarked on another night patrol in the deep waters off the coast of Florida. The crew comprised experienced fishermen who had spent years working together. Captain Mike Dawson, a man in his 50s known for his deep knowledge of the sea and its mysteries, was at the helm. Mike's calm demeanor put his crew at ease, even during the toughest conditions. He had seen many things in his career, but always looked for the unexpected. The crew comprised Jake, the first mate in his 30s. He had a natural fishing talent, having worked on boats since his teens. Enthusiastic and sharp-eyed, he often spotted unusual things before others. Emily, the ship's biologist in her late 20s, was passionate about marine life and provided valuable insights into sea creatures. Tom, a reliable deckhand in his 40s, was known for his strength and always ensured the crew's safety during their shifts. On this particular night, the atmosphere was calm, with the moon shining brightly over the water. The crew was focused on their duties, preparing their gear for a routine catch. However, something unusual caught their attention as they moved further from shore. Using their night vision equipment, they noticed a large mass moving beneath the surface. Piqued by curiosity, they decided to approach cautiously. The crew was shocked to see a school of unnaturally large sharks swimming together as they got closer. Their size and how they moved in unison were unlike anything the crew had ever witnessed. It was as if the sharks were exhibiting coordinated behavior, which raised alarms in Emily's mind. She began to speculate about what could be causing this strange phenomenon. Tension hung in the air as the crew watched the sharks, their instincts warning them of potential danger. Suddenly, without warning, one of the sharks lunged out of the water and attacked one of the sailors leaning over the side of the boat. The crew erupted into chaos, shouting in horror as they rushed to help their colleague. The attack was swift and brutal, sending shockwaves of fear through everyone aboard the Horizon's Edge. Captain Mike barked orders for the crew to retreat to safety in the frenzy, but the panic was palpable. They quickly grabbed emergency equipment and desperately called for backup. The situation was unprecedented, and the crew realized they were facing something never documented in marine biology. The sheer size and aggression of the sharks indicated that they were not acting normally. With the vessel now in a state of emergency, the crew had to come together and devise a plan to protect themselves. Mike and Jake took charge, assessing the injuries and ensuring everyone was accounted for. Emily's scientific knowledge began to kick in as she tried to figure out why the sharks behaved this way. She wondered if something in the environment had triggered this unusual behavior. As the crew worked to stabilize the situation, they couldn't shake the fear of what they were dealing with. They were not just fishermen anymore. They were caught fighting for survival against an aggressive force of nature. The night that had started so calmly had turned into a nightmare, and the mystery of the sharks loomed large in their minds. The Horizon's Edge was now in uncharted waters, literally and metaphorically, and the crew knew they had to find a way to survive the night. The crew quickly gathered their wits to formulate a plan as the chaos continued on the Horizon's Edge. Captain Mike assessed the situation, realizing that they needed to move fast. The injured sailor was in shock, and they had to get him to safety. Jake and Tom worked together to pull the sailor away from the boat's edge, keeping him calm despite the chaos surrounding them. Emily used her training to check the sailor's injuries, applying pressure to stop the bleeding. She knew they had to act quickly to prevent further harm. The sight of the large, aggressive shark swimming close to the boat made her heart race, but she forced herself to stay focused. She recalled her studies about shark behavior and understood that something was wrong in the ocean. These sharks were not acting like normal predators. They were coordinated and appeared to be hunting as a group. With the injured sailor stabilized, Mike ordered the crew to raise the anchor and prepare to leave the area. They needed to get away from the sharks and find a safer spot. As the crew worked to maneuver the boat, the tension in the air was thick with fear. Every splash of water or sudden movement sent a jolt of anxiety through them. Just as they thought they might be able to escape, the sharks circled the boat again, showing no signs of retreat. Their large bodies moved in sync beneath the water, creating a sense of unease among the crew. It was as if the sharks knew of their presence and would not let them leave easily. The crew quickly realized they were facing an attack and a mysterious behavior that could threaten their survival. Mike steered the boat away from the area with the engine roaring to life, hoping to distance themselves from the aggressive school of sharks. However, the sharks followed closely, indicating they needed to be finished. Emily's mind raced as she wondered why these sharks acted this way. She knew that environmental changes could affect marine life, but what could have caused such a dramatic shift in behavior? Emily quickly jotted down her observations as they sped away, documenting everything she could about the sharks' actions. She understood that this incident could lead to significant discoveries about marine biology. But right now, her main concern was the safety of her crew. After an eternity, the crew finally reached a quieter part of the water. The sharks seemed to lose interest, allowing the crew to sigh in relief. They quickly anchored the boat and assessed the damage. The injured sailors needed immediate medical attention, but they had managed to escape the jaws of danger. Once they were safe, the crew gathered to discuss what had just happened. They shared their thoughts on the sharks' unusual behavior and speculated about the reasons behind it. Emily suggested that water temperature or pollution changes might drive the sharks to act aggressively. The crew agreed they must report their findings to the local marine authorities. The aftermath of the encounter was not just about surviving the night. It was about understanding the implications of their experience. The crew had faced a terrifying ordeal that could have ended in tragedy, but they emerged with a newfound respect for the power of nature. They realized they needed to be more cautious and aware of their environmental impact. The crew members were determined to share their story as they returned to shore. They hoped that by raising awareness about the behavior of these sharks, they could contribute to protecting marine life and the safety of those who ventured out to sea. On July 15, 2024, the coastal community of Clearwater Beach was struck by a series of shocking shark attacks. The attacks led to widespread panic among residents and visitors, forcing local authorities to act immediately. In response to the alarming situation, a specialized rescue team was assembled to investigate the incidents and ensure the safety of everyone in the water. The Ocean Guardians rescue team consisted of highly skilled professionals with expertise in marine biology, underwater rescue, and shark behavior. Captain Laura James, a seasoned marine biologist in her early 40s, led the team. Laura was respected for her deep knowledge of sharks and extensive rescue operations experience. Mark, a veteran diver, was known for his quick thinking and calm nature. He excelled in underwater rescues and connected with marine life. Sarah, a passionate shark researcher in her late 20s, focused on great white behavior and offered invaluable insights. Eric, a veteran lifeguard familiar with local waters, brought practical rescue skills and risk assessment to the team. As the Ocean Guardians arrived at Clearwater Beach, they were met with concerned faces and a palpable sense of fear. The recent attacks had closed the beach, and many locals were worried about their safety. The team quickly gathered information from witnesses and analyzed reports about the incidents. It became evident that something unusual was happening in the waters. After equipping themselves with the necessary gear, the team set out to dive into the ocean. They planned to rescue any stranded swimmers and uncover the cause behind the aggressive shark behavior. As they entered the water, the team's determination was palpable. They knew they had to act swiftly to prevent further attacks and protect the community. Once submerged, the divers began their search. The ocean was dark and vast, and they relied on their training and instincts to navigate. As they swam deeper, they noticed distress among the local marine life. Fish scattered in all directions, and the water felt charged with tension. The team communicated through hand signals, aware of the potential danger lurking nearby. Suddenly, the divers spotted a large shadow moving through the water. It was a great white shark, larger than they had anticipated. The shark circled, displaying a sense of dominance that sent chills down their spines. The team quickly recognized that this was no ordinary predator. It seemed to be orchestrating the attacks, actively hunting for swimmers. The atmosphere grew tense as the shark approached. Laura signaled the team to remain calm and focused. They had to observe the shark's behavior closely and look for patterns. As they swam in a tight formation, the shark moved closer, testing their presence. The team felt the weight of their mission. They needed to find a way to communicate or deter this intelligent predator before more lives were lost. As they continued their observations, the shark moved, lunging towards them in an aggressive display. The team quickly reacted, using their training to maneuver away from the attack. Panic surged, but they held their composure, understanding that their response could mean the difference between life and death. The Ocean Guardians knew they were facing a formidable challenge. With the shark acting as the orchestrator of chaos in the waters, they had to devise a plan to ensure the safety of the community and themselves. The threat was real, and the stakes were high. The battle for survival had just begun, and the team needed to rely on each other as they navigated the treacherous waters in the looming presence of the great white shark. As the Ocean Guardians faced the great white shark, the tension in the water was thick with fear and uncertainty. The shark swam in circles around them, its massive body gliding through the ocean with power and grace. The team had to think quickly to stay safe. They knew that any wrong move could provoke the shark further. Captain Laura James led the team with calm determination. She reminded her divers to keep their movements smooth and controlled. They needed to avoid splashing or sudden movements that could attract the shark's attention. Instead, they focused on gathering data and understanding the predator's behavior. Mark and Sarah took the opportunity to observe the shark closely. They noted its patterns and movements, hoping to find clues about why it was behaving so aggressively. While the team stayed vigilant, they also needed to plan their next steps. They could not remain in the water indefinitely, especially with the risk of further attacks. Eric suggested that they create a diversion to distract the shark while they returned to the submarine's safety. The team agreed that this was necessary. Using equipment from their dive gear, the team began to work on their plan. They prepared a small underwater device designed to emit sound waves. This device could confuse the shark and draw its attention away from the divers. Sarah positioned the device to create vibrations in the water while the others swam in a formation that allowed them to maintain a clear line of sight. As they activated the device, the sound waves pulsed through the ocean. The great white shark paused, momentarily distracted by the noise. The team seized this opportunity to swim toward the safety of the submarine. As they approached the submarine, the shark turned and followed them. Its interest peaked again. The team quickly climbed aboard, scrambling to get inside and secure the hatch. Inside the submarine, the team assessed their situation. They were shaken but grateful to have escaped the immediate threat. They gathered around the control panel, determined to analyze what they had witnessed. Sarah reviewed the data collected during the dive, seeking answers to the shark's unusual behavior. Tension remained high as they discussed the next steps. They realized that understanding the great white's behavior was crucial to ensuring the safety of the coastal community. The team decided to share their findings with marine biologists and authorities on the surface, hoping to create a plan to prevent future attacks. As they prepared to surface, Laura reflected on the day's events. The encounters with the shark had opened their eyes to the complexities of marine life and the need for more research. Once they surfaced, the team could have spent more time relaying their findings to the local authorities. They described the great white shark's behavior and the need for immediate action to protect both swimmers and the shark itself. They understood these creatures were vital to the ecosystem, and addressing the situation required a thoughtful approach. After their experience, the Ocean Guardians became advocates for shark conservation and education. They organized community outreach programs to raise awareness about sharks and the importance of respecting marine life. Their mission evolved from a rescue team to a voice for the ocean, emphasizing unity and understanding between humans and wildlife. On July 8, 2024, the luxury yacht, the Ocean Jewel, departed from Miami, carrying affluent passengers eager for a lavish getaway. The yacht boasted gourmet dining, a pool, and attentive staff. Among the guests were Richard and Emily Hawthorne, a successful real estate couple in their 50s, along with their daughter Sarah, a recent college graduate. Known for enjoying luxury vacations, they had high expectations for the trip. Also aboard was Marcus Wright, a charismatic tech entrepreneur, and his business partner, Lisa Chen, a sharp investor. They were celebrating a lucrative deal they had just finalized. Another couple aboard was Tom and Linda Carter, a retired pair passionate about world travel. Seasoned cruisers, calm demeanor, and stories made them well liked by the group. As the yacht sailed further, the weather changed unexpectedly. Dark clouds gathered and winds intensified faster than the crew anticipated. A peaceful day at sea quickly turned chaotic. Waves crashed against the yacht and the wind howled fiercely. Passengers scrambled for life jackets as the boat swayed violently. In moments, the storm worsened, capsizing the yacht and plunging everyone into the dark, churning sea. Panic ensued as they fought to stay afloat. Amid the chaos, Richard, Emily, and Sarah found each other clinging to a raft that had broken free from the yacht. Tom and Linda also managed to hold on to a makeshift raft, but were separated from Marcus and Lisa, who struggled in the stormy waters. The passengers' shock shifted to survival as the storm raged on. They soon realized they were in shark-infested waters, the scent of fuel and commotion drawing the sharks closer. The constant threat of attack heightened their desperation. When the storm subsided, reality sank in. They were stranded, isolated, and surrounded by danger. With limited supplies and hope fading, tension grew as sharks circled beneath, their fins breaking the surface, a stark reminder of their difficult situation. Richard tried to maintain order, urging everyone to stay together and conserve energy, but the stress began to take its toll. Disagreements arose as survival instincts kicked in and tempers flared. The group faced both physical challenges and internal conflicts, As night fell, darkness brought an eerie quiet. The sound of waves against the rafts was constant, and below them sharks silently circled, their presence felt but unseen. The passengers knew they had to stay vigilant. One wrong move could be fatal. Nature's brutal reality was clear. Their luxurious lives felt distant as they faced the ocean's power and lurking predators. The struggle for survival had begun, and they had to work together to make it through the night. As darkness enveloped the ocean, the group aboard the makeshift rafts faced a dire situation. The calm after the storm brought little relief, leaving them with fear and uncertainty. Richard, Emily, and Sarah huddled together for warmth and strength, watching the shark's fins slicing through the surface, a constant reminder of the lurking danger. Tension hung in the air, and the survivors knew that even a small splash could draw the shark's attention. Richard urged them to form a plan, suggesting they gather floating debris to stabilize their rafts and stay together. Sarah spotted some wood nearby, and with her father's encouragement, they began collecting it. Meanwhile, Tom and Linda worked to secure their raft. Seeing Marcus and Lisa struggling a short distance away, Tom waved them over. Despite the risk, Marcus and Lisa carefully paddled toward Tom and Linda's raft, avoiding splashes to minimize the chance of attracting sharks. Once together, the group discussed their situation, recognizing the need to stay calm and focused and conserve energy and supplies. Linda suggested taking shifts to watch for sharks while others rested, ensuring they stayed alert without exhausting themselves. Everyone agreed, knowing that teamwork was essential for survival. As the night wore on, the sharks continued circling, their dark shapes a constant reminder of the danger. The survivors felt the weight of their predicament, worrying about their loved ones and the fate of those still on the yacht. The vast isolation of the ocean felt overwhelming. At dawn, the first light brought a brief hope as the sunrise cast a warm glow on the water. But that hope quickly faded. As the sun rose, the sharks grew more active, their behavior becoming increasingly aggressive. Sarah suddenly spotted a shark speeding toward their raft, sparking panic in the group. The massive shark lunged, its jaws wide. Richard instinctively pushed Sarah back, putting himself in danger. Quick thinking, Marcus grabbed a piece of wood and splashed it in the water, trying to distract the shark. The splash startled the shark, causing it to veer off but quickly circled back. The group knew they had to stay united to fend off the threat. They began banging on the rafts and splashing water, hoping the noise would deter the sharks. The next few hours dragged on as the survivors made noise while others rested. Exhaustion set in and their supplies dwindled. Richard and Marcus discussed signaling for help, recognizing that staying in one place was dangerous, but knowing they needed to find a way to safety. As midday approached, the group spotted a distant boat. Hope surged as they realized rescue might be near. They waved their arms and shouted, careful not to splash and attract the shark's attention. The fishing boat slowed as its crew noticed the survivors. However, the sharks grew more aggressive as the vessel approached, drawn by the movement and noise. Just as the boat reached them, chaos ensued. One shark lunged at Sarah, who was near the raft's edge. Richard swiftly pulled her back, but the sudden motion caused a wave that threw the group off balance. The shark's powerful body slammed into the raft, sending everyone scrambling to hold on. The fishing crew sprang into action, tossing a rope to the survivors, who grabbed it and fought against the relentless sharks. With adrenaline pumping, they pulled themselves toward the safety of the boat. Finally, the survivors were pulled aboard the fishing vessel and collapsed on the deck, shaken but relieved. The crew tended to their injuries while the group reflected on their ordeal. The experience had deeply impacted them, starkly reminding them of nature's raw power and the importance of safety at sea. Together, they carried the memory of their struggle and the lessons learned into their future.